This was the second time in less than 24 hours that the DGMOs of the Indian military, whether it is the Army, Air Force, and the Naval, all the Director General Operations of the three services of the Indian military, they addressed a press conference. Now, the focus of this press conference today was that the Indian military establishment wanted to make it very, very clear that the fight of India's fight was with the terrorists only, and not even with the Pakistani military, not to speak of the Pakistani civilians. Now, this is a strong message that the Indian military establishment, or for that matter, the Indian government, wanted to send out. Said that their fight is with the Pakistani terrorists and not with the Pakistani civilians, and not with the Pakistani military. That is the message that was sent out in very, very clear terms. Now, they said that it was Pakistan who decided to back the terrorists and escalate the situation. And whatever losses the Pakistan has faced, Pakistani military has faced, was their own doing. It was because of they were themselves responsible for the losses that they faced. So this is one message that the military press conference today wanted to send out, and they have very, very effectively sent out that message. Now, another major point that was raised by the three DGMOs was basically that they talked about how effective India's air defense is and how effective India's air defense was in the last 4 days of that conflict with Pakistan. They said that the multi-layered the air defense, both weapons as well as the highly trained personnel who were using these weapons of air defense, they completely succeeded in blunting the Pakistani attack. In fact, the integrated weapon system turned out to be highly effective against the Pakistani raids. This is another major point that was highlighted during this press conference. Now, of course, another point that they highlighted was the efficacy or the effectiveness of the indigenously built air defense systems. That was also emphasized. That point was also not missed out. And another thing, Japan, another important point was the role of the Indian Navy. Now, the aircraft carriers were out in the North Arabian Sea and elsewhere, and they confined the Pakistani Air Force into the Makran coast, and that completely immobilized the Pakistani Air Force in large parts of the 7,500 kilometer long coastline as well as the border. So that's what also was the message that they were trying to send out, that the role of the role of the Indian Navy and the Director Generals of the militaries, whether it's the Air Force, Army, and the Navy, they also lauded the role of the Border Security Force. And they also mentioned that the Border Security Forces air defense system was also part of this multi-layered air defense grid. And on the whole, this was the message that this press conference wanted to send out. And they acknowledged that this was a totally different form of warfare. And very interestingly, Air Marshal A.K. Bharti, the Director General Air Operations, one of the senior-most defense officials of India, he recited from the 16th century epic poem, the Ramacharitamans. And, we all know about this famous epic poem by Tulsidas, one of India's, he was a national poet of India. And this story retells, or rather tells, the story of Lord Ram. So this is very, very interesting. A top army officer in this times of a warlike situation decided to recite from the Ramacharitamans, the 16th century epic poem by Tulsidas, and that's given a very, very interesting, soothing influence into the otherwise very, very hard operational details, details that the military operations directors, generals were giving out during the press conference. So I'd wrap up by saying, Japan, fight only with terrorists, not even with the Pakistani military, not to speak of civilians. Pakistan is itself responsible for all the losses that it suffered. India's multi-layered air defense was extremely effective. India's well-trained air defense personnel were also highly effective. The integrated weapon system that India has and the indigenous weapon systems that India has also proved to be highly effective. The Navy, the aircraft carriers are out in the sea, and they could manage to confine the Pakistani Air Force to the Makran coast, unable to intrude into India, and they acknowledged that this was a different form of warfare. Chipan.
Right, Wasbir. Now, the DGM also made it very clear that all Indian military installations are intact and ready for more operations. Clear message to Pakistan's misinformation campaign. What do you make of this message, Wasbir?
Absolutely, Sipan. That is a very good point that you decided to pick out from this press conference. Yes, another very, very clear message that was sent. In fact, the videos had a lot of clarity. The videos that were shown today of the impact of the Pakistani airfields that were hit by the Indian strikes on May 9th and 10th. The pictures were quite clear. A lot of the air bases were non-functional. There were deep craters formed in several of the Pakistani airfields. And they said that Pakistani Air Force was, to a great extent, they had limited mobility because of the Indian strikes. On the contrary, the Indian airfields and Indian air assets have been fully operational. That is what has been said in absolutely clear terms, and said that the Indian Air Force is ready, absolutely ready and operational to carry out any future mission. That is also one of the very, very hard-hitting and clear statements given out by the Indian Air Force and the Indian Army.
Right. Wasbir, one more question, please allow me. Throughout the confrontation, India only attacked terror dens or military bases of the Pakistan. Now, India played the game really well here. Not only has India's stance or mission or position won it global admiration or appreciation, but even the Pakistani nationals themselves, because we know the situation of Pakistanis in their own land, Wasbir.
Absolutely. India has right from the beginning the Indian response has been calibrated, highly thought out, and it was not non-escalatory in nature. In fact, yesterday it was made very clear that on the 7th of May, when India struck the 9 terror camps, killing about 100 terrorists, including 5 top terror leaders, India made it clear yesterday that they wanted to inform the Pakistani DGMO of that operation where they had hit 9 terrorist camps. But the Pakistani DGMO refused to take the call and refused to speak to his Indian counterpart, Lieutenant General Ghai. So India wanted to tell Pakistan that what action it had done was only against the terrorists. India wanted to tell Pakistan that on the 7th of May itself, but the Pakistan decided not to speak to India on that occasion and decided with the terrorists and escalated the situation. So this is something which the world has now come to know. And now, there were deep strikes. We also, despite being journalists, despite being media people, we also cannot say a lot of things which we may know from our sources in national interest, and we are never going to do that. But India struck deep into Pakistan. India struck at the very heart of Pakistan, and I'm not going to say anything more than this. And that made the Pakistanis extremely jittery. They panicked and they opposed the United States to work out a ceasefire. And when the United States approached, the Indians agreed, but said that Pakistan has to request for a ceasefire, and that is what was conveyed to the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis agreed, and that is why it was the Pakistan DGMO, Japan, who first made the call at 3:35 day before yesterday, 3:35 in the afternoon, 3:35 p.m. Called up the Indian DGMO and requested for a ceasefire, which was accepted. There was a couple of conditions, of course, which I don't like to go into it at this point in time.